The summer visitor to a hot, sultry Florence can hardly picture the raging torrent that the River Arno became during the night of November the 4th, 1966. Water, dammed up by the narrow banks and contained by the Ponte Vecchio, flooded the town to a depth of 15 feet. Water does not discriminate between trash and the finest treasures. Everything was completely swamped, and above all, much of the great legacy of Florentine art was buried for days beneath tons of mud and debris and a lake of putrid water. The National Library was among the worst affected. The immediate aim was to get the library working again. The reading rooms had to be cleared, the walls dried out and repainted, new furniture bought, new desks installed. A catalogue system is the nerve center of any library. Without it, a library just cannot function. All the filing cards were flooded, the handwritten lettering washed away, and the millions of cards put into complete disorder. The library is taking this chance to microfilm the restored cards and reprint them to international specifications. A microfilm copy is kept in Florence and in the library in Rome. Two famous collections form the basis of the library: the 60,000 manuscripts and volumes of Antonio Magliabecchi, librarian to Cosimo de' Medici, was added to the 50,000 books and manuscripts of the Palatina collection, that of the Grand Dukes of Tuscany. The national copyright is vested there, and a copy of every book and newspaper printed in Italy must be lodged at the library. The richness of its material is unrivaled. The value of its collection, dating from the 15th century, is unique and forms the basic source for all scholarship in Renaissance studies, as well as other fields such as modern Italian history and the development of printing and book production. An Italian scholar wrote, "The history of thought and of our literature can neither be traced nor sought without using this library, where are brought together the most conspicuous and numerous documents of humanism, which began and established itself above all in Florence." Books returned to the library from their emergency washing and drying treatment were first sterilized in an ethylene oxide chamber against mold and bacteria. The library itself was washed and sterilized 3 times. The outside of every book is photographed, and any relevant details inside as well. A number is assigned to the book. A print of the photograph and the number accompany the book throughout its restoration. So far, 50,000 books have been photographed. Photography keeps a record of the damage and helps in choosing a new binding for the restoration. A librarian selects each book to be restored, classifies it according to value, and with the help of a restorer, marks up a card with symbols to show what work is to be done. The librarian must give priority not only to those books which are valuable, but also to those that are heavily used. The book is collated, the pages checked for their order and number, for many early books were inaccurately numbered. Some edges were badly stuck with mud, sawdust, and gelatine, and this was concentrated most between the sections of books, leaving them as brittle as a freshly baked biscuit. Covers that had been hurriedly ripped off dragged the sewing through the sections. Early 16th century spines suffered least, as they had been pasted with starch rather than hide glue. The insides of limp vellum books survived best. Sewing is cut from the spine so that the sections can be parted. Leaves that are free are pulled in the traditional way. As much mud as possible is removed dry by flexing the leaves, but thick layers of mud are scraped with delicate care using spatulas and sharp blades. The drier the mud, the easier the work. Every part of the book, covers, headbands, cords, threads, fragments, is catalogued and preserved in envelopes. Some specially bad books have to be soaked and treated in a solution of alcohol and water, which also makes the leaves stiff when they are wet and so easy to handle. The colored prints and plates of other books, which may offset, are sprayed with a solution of soluble nylon in alcohol to preserve them. These books are then interleaved with wet-strength paper and sent through the washing processes. Many early books had vellum fly-leaves, which the water stuck to the title pages. Others have bindings with manuscript spines, which will need the same treatment. They are soaked and loosened in alcohol and then dried under tension. Comparatively few books were affected by the oil escaping from central heating plants, for the oil floated on top of the water, and most of the books were protected from oil by the mud. Oil is removed in a solution of xylene and trichloroethylene. The experimental research necessary for these treatments is undertaken at two centers, the Institute of Book Pathology in Rome and by the Imperial College of Science and Technology in association with the Royal College of Art in London. Here, physicists and chemists study problems of restoration and carry out historical research into paper and binding structures and materials. fuller's earth is used to absorb traces of oil and chemical solution. "40 stainless steel sinks have been built in the washing section of the library, each thermostatically controlled. Strange as it may seem after a flood, nearly every book needs to be washed, leaf by leaf. The washing water contains a fungicide solution. Leaves are floated on ply boards, which are easily submerged. Gelatine and mud smears are brushed away. It takes about 4 hours to wash a book." Some books are resized after washing in a parchment size, or methyl cellulose, or polyvinyl alcohol. Where leaves are particularly fragile, they are soaked in an alcohol solution containing soluble nylon. Size binds the paper fibers together and gives support in handling, particularly to short-fibered and highly absorbent papers. The books are more alkaline after the flood. Random pH tests are taken with a flathead electrode, and a few books which suffer from too much acidity, particularly from ink stains, are deacidified. Bleaching is limited to print restoration and severe staining such as from the tannin in leather covers which make the pages illegible. It is then neutralized with an anti-chlor, washed for 6 hours, and then deacidified. Each book doubles its weight with water absorbed during washing. Drying must be done carefully and at the right temperature and speed. Too violent a heat buckles the paper. Too low a heat is a waste of time, for it takes between half an hour and an hour, according to the thickness of paper, to dry a book. Olive netting is used for the racks on which the leaves are laid. Warm air at 30 degrees centigrade circulates through the specially constructed drying cabinets. The 4 of them, 20 feet long, take the whole length of the drying room. Trolleys full of racks can be wheeled into them. An aquabuoy is used to take random samples of water content. The leaves are taken up again from the nets and handed over to library staff for checking and putting in order. The reassembled book is wrapped in brown paper impregnated with fungicide to await mending and binding. prints are handled separately in a restoration room provided by the Australian government and set up by a distinguished restorer. Many of the problems in print restoration are the same as in book restoration. The prints have to be pulled, washed, dried, and collated in a similar way, though extra care must be taken against losing color and offsetting, a danger in bleaching work such as this. In very rare cases, a mechanical rubber is used to take off surface dirt. The main reading room of the library was converted into the mending room and bindery. All the benches were custom made in sections, so that they can be moved when necessary and the room reconverted to its proper use. The original intention was to send the washed and dried books to binders throughout the world for mending and binding, but it soon became apparent that this was impractical, as the standards of work varied so widely, and it was impossible to keep control. So the decision was made that mending, the most time-consuming part of the operation, should be done in the library, and that binding should follow. The mending department was designed for 30 workers, the most for whom space and wages could be found, and the training of 5 unskilled men and women each week was started in July 1967. On average, every section has 2 folds needing repair. Different methods have been evolved to cope with different conditions of paper and damage, much of which was caused by early binding techniques. A lens tissue is impregnated with adhesive, applied either by brush or spray gun for the mending of simple tears. It is applied with a warm heating iron. Serious tears and missing pieces of leaves are mended with long-fibered Japanese tissue paper. When this is torn, it leaves fiber strands up to 1/4 of an inch long. The restorers could easily rush through the work and put makeshift books back on the shelves for the public to read. But this would be irresponsible to these unique collections. So a balance has to be found between the needs of readers and the needs of the books. The restoration work undertaken in the library would normally be done book by book in individual craftsman studios, time and cost being secondary considerations to the quality of work. A book can only be rebound a limited number of times, so the present restorer must leave as little as possible for future rebinders to do. Some could be replaced from the world's book markets, but a book can hardly be replaced when it is a presentation copy, or part of a famous collection, or is unique by virtue of the notes in its margins or collector's markings. Long fiber technique is useful in strengthening mends that would otherwise be repaired with a paper of the same thickness and joined with a stiff paste. variations on it have been developed using a spray gun to damp the whole leaf and combinations of heat set and long fiber techniques. The fibers of the Japanese tissue overlap the original and are impregnated with a paste specially designed not to leave a stain and to remain flexible. The paste is spread out into the leaf to add support round the mend. It is then damped and pressed using a terylene sheet to prevent it sticking. A book can take up to a week to mend, but less than 10 hours to rebind. The choice of sewing structure depends on many factors, such as the weight and flexibility of paper, the book's thickness, the use to which it will be put, its historical significance, and the type of binding chosen. In a herringbone sewing, thread is passed around white alum tawed or whitawed pigskin. This was used in medieval books and is often still so sound that it can be reused. A headband is sewn in place for a limp vellum binding. Headbands must be particularly strong for this type of binding because they are laced into the covers. Among the many different characteristics of sewings, an important one is the flexibility and ease with which a book can be opened. The Magliabechiana collection has many fine limp and semi-limp vellum bindings, which are typical of Tuscany and important to it. It can be a practical, long-lasting, and inexpensive way of binding a book, and has been chosen for recovering many of the 16th and 17th century volumes. But the technique has become decadent over the last 200 years, and research is in progress to lay down new standards. The full natural thickness of a skin is best for covering a book, so the characteristics of both must be taken into account. The skin is cut and edged with a paring knife. The head and tail is carefully marked and scored from the fresh side, and the turn-ins formed and pressed with an ivory folder. modern covering vellum is difficult to find, and its quality is often geared to military drums rather than fine books. Atmospheric changes influence it all too easily, making it difficult to handle, and modern skins are less strong and supple than their medieval counterparts. The spine of the book is centered on the vellum cover, and while the skin is still flat, the lower spine score is marked, scored, and folded. A book of this style has no backing, so the main consideration in choosing the width of the joint is the amount of swelling. This is marked on the hair side. The main strength of a medieval limp vellum binding lay in its structure. The whittled leather thongs, which are tannin-free and do not stain the vellum, are intertwined with the spine linings as well as the covering vellum, thus making a complete unit and not just a book covered by a casing. Vellum must be allowed to breathe, for if it is stuck down onto boards, it will inevitably distort with changes of humidity and temperature. Round holes are punched in the skin. These keep their shape and will not tear. Similar holes are punched on the outside, and the thong is relaced and tied on the inside. A semi-yap, or lip, is often extended from the foredge of a cover, particularly on thicker books. Several interlocking corners have been designed to suit different books. Little or no adhesive is used. Very little research had been undertaken in limp vellum bindings before the flood made it an urgent priority, and it is hoped that the work done in Florence will be a guide to other libraries throughout the world. If the library can raise enough money, it can develop its unique restoration center for the study of book conservation and for the training of book conservators from every country. End papers are not pasted easily to the hair side of vellum, so it is best to scrape the turn-ins and prepare a suitable surface. End papers provide an inward pull against the natural curl of the vellum. The simple folio end paper has been replaced by a zigzag style, which opens much more easily. No decision has been made yet on the style or form of lettering or identification to be placed on the spines. Most of the other rare books will be covered in leather in a form appropriate to their period. The leather must be pared down a little, either mechanically or with a spoke shave, so that it fits snugly round the boards. The boards, too, are shaped mechanically, or with glass paper or a spoke shave, before being punched to take the lacing cords. These are set in place, and the boards pull the spine round, and so form a shoulder at both sides of the book. This method was used well into the 17th century and is much less damaging to the spine than the modern method of rounding and backing. It is not typical of the work in the library, but represents the library's attitude of finding a suitable binding for each book. A commercial bindery will be established for the less rare books published after 1840. The leather is pasted out on a soft rubber pad, which helps in molding its shape over the spine. Since the 16th century, Florence has been flooded 5 times, none as seriously as the last, but the danger is not yet over. Astonishingly little was completely lost. But the National Library, although the largest, was only one of many libraries to be flooded. At least 28 other important collections have suffered serious damage, among them the Gabinetto Vieusseux, the library of the German Institute, the State Archives, and the libraries of the Academy of Fine Arts and the Academy of Music. To this must be added many other local and university libraries and archives, and the books stored at private booksellers, collectors, and repairers. The damage and loss to scholarship is incalculable. The Italians have gladly received the technical and financial support offered to them. Binders from many countries have worked in the system and trained students and workers. Notable help has come from the British Italian Art and Archives Rescue Fund and the American Committee for the Rescue of Italian Art. By far the largest support is now coming from the Italian government. Yet the rich treasure of knowledge, skills, and scholarship to be gained in this unique experience is in danger of being lost for lack of money. If the restoration and training can continue, the washing and drying of books should be complete in 3 years. The mending and binding of the 80,000 pre-1840 books will take at least 25 years. Besides this, there are nearly 500,000 books to be library bound.